What's up, basketball coaches, players, and fans? Welcome to the Pass First podcast, where we share our knowledge of the game of basketball. My name is Augie Johnston, and I'm here with my partner, Alex Engel. We hope you're able to take something away from this podcast that will help you in your basketball journey. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into today's episode. All right, you guys, thanks for checking out the episode. We're super excited today because today we are going to be talking about zone offense, zone defense, and how to have success with both of those. So I guess we'll start this whole conversation off with just kind of our thoughts on zone defense. If you've checked out some of the other episodes, which I recommend you do, then you might already know the answer to this. But I'm going to go ahead and start off by asking Alex kind of what your thoughts are on running zone defense.
I'm not a huge proponent on zone defenses. I do prefer man-to-man. I think, especially if you have a good man defense, you can contain, you can rotate out of it better. I think it's easier to rebound out of. But obviously there are situations where you need to be able to run a zone. I still teach it to my teams because if you play certain teams that have maybe non-shooting teams or maybe they're really, really aggressive attacking the basket and it's hard for you to contain them, you might want to try and run a zone to switch things up. So, it's not my favorite. I do think a lot of times teams just rely on zone and choose not to teach their teams any man principles because they think it's easier. But yeah, it's just not my personal philosophy.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat as you. I always am a man first kind of coach, but I think I definitely do use zone more than you probably in my past experiences. And I'm not like a hater on anybody that runs zone defense, but I do think that if that's all you're going to do is just be a zone defense team, then you're going to find that you're not going to be able to beat some teams. And it's also too, you're not setting your team up or your players up for the future, right? Mm-hmm. And we see it a lot in the youth level is pretty much every team that we play, and I'm talking about grades, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, about there with our youth program, that most of the teams play zone against us, and it's effective. Like, you have to admit that it's hard for us to score against zones at that age because, number one, you can't throw skip passes because you're not strong enough. Number two, can't shoot from the outside as well. But yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. So I know you kind of already mentioned it a little bit, but like, when you are going to run zone, like, what's one thing that's going to say, all right, we're going to run zone, and let's just go ahead and say this is before, right? During the scout, you're scouting a team and you're like, hey, I think we're going to run zone this week. We never do, but this week we're going to run zone. Why would that be?
First and foremost, a team that can't shoot. If you know a team just cannot shoot the ball at all, zone defense might be a great way to slow them down, because if you've got a team that's, like, say, shooting 20, 25% from three as a team, and they don't have anyone shooting over, 30% from three, then you're going to want to force them to take contested threes and let them chuck it up. And realistically, unless they have a crazy hot shooting night, they're probably not going to be super effective doing that. Now, obviously, there's counters to it other than just shooting threes, but a lot of times teams don't really know how to counter things. Even at the high school level, they don't really know how to counter a zone well, other than, like, I got to hit my shots in order to get the other team out of it. So definitely that. I think, like I said before, if you're really struggling containing a team, if they just have, like, super quick guards and they're constantly getting in the paint, you're not able to rotate, you might run a zone because you kind of pack it in a little bit. Those are two of the main things that I would think of as why you would, run a zone instead of your typical man defense.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I've done both those same things as well. And, like, especially the one that resonates with me is, like, when you can't contain, right? When you play a team that's super athletic and you man-to-man, they're just picking you apart. Like, yeah, I think it's a good time to run zone and make sure to contain those ball handlers. For me, kind of a lot of it has to do with personnel too. Like, I know in the past few seasons, I've had a lot of bigs. And there'd be times you're like, hey, we need to go big right now, whether we're not rebounding or whatever it is. But at the same time, I can't have my 6'8" guy guarding, some 5-man that's, whatever, 6 foot, who's more agile on the other team if they're playing with 5 guards. So that's when I'll use zone a lot, is with just certain lineups. I know that like, hey, we can kind of hide our big on this, and he's going to be a great rim protector in the zone right there in the middle.
Mm.
And then offensively, hopefully we can exploit their small ball style and get the ball inside on them. But yeah, I think also for me, the times that I choose to run zone are in the middle of the game, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. So we talked about looking at a scout and then going and saying, all right, we're going to play a lot of zone this game. We know it. Like, how about just in the middle of the game? Like, at what point will you actually say, timeout, timeout? All right, you guys, we're in zone.
Mm. Um, I think mainly I would say in the middle of the game is probably a containment thing, right? If I'm constantly getting beat, that's probably when I'm going to go to a zone. It's probably not. I mean, it does happen where you maybe see a team shoot a few shots, and they're missing, and you're like, all right, let's go to a zone. But realistically, I think most of the time it's when you're getting beat all the time off the dribble. Because if you know they can't shoot, you probably prepped for that before the game, right? Um, I don't know that I would necessarily in the middle of a game just because the team's having a slightly off night be like, all right, let's go to a zone, because then what if they get hot? I wouldn't want to risk that. So that's a situation. Or if you just do it to switch things up, because the other team's getting comfortable playing against man, and you're like, all right, let's go to zone for like one or two possessions, and then throw their rhythm off, and then once their rhythm's off, okay, we're going to go back to our man defense. So those are a couple of scenarios that I would think of.
Yeah, and I love the switching back from zone to man. Like that's something that we started to do at the end of last year a little bit, and found some success with it, and something that I look forward to learning more about and trying to implement more. I know a lot of teams too will run zone like when they press, right? I mean,
Hmm.
even last year I had someone tell me you can't press 2-2-1 and go back into man. You just can't do it. And I'm just like, we're not getting beat, because of that. Like, we are running a 2-2 zone, but our guys were good at matching up. You can communicate, match up, and get into man. But
Right.
most coaches, and a lot of coaches do, they go zone, and no matter what, they'll go back or run press, and no matter what, go back into zone.
I'm kind of with you. Like I don't have a problem pressing and going into man. I don't think that's that big of a deal. Like I said, if you really struggle with matching up and you just have a team that maybe they just don't have the overall IQ to figure that out, then yeah, it's probably easier to go into a zone. But again, it's like you got to kind of know your team, and you got to at least try it. I feel like if you're just like, oh no, we can't do it, I'm never going to try it. Well, you might not even know what your team's capable of.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so for me, as far as like in middle of the game, like when I'm like, okay, we need to go zone, it's normally if we're down, right? If we're playing man and we're fine and we're winning, or it's close, then I'll stick with man. But as soon as I start to see like, hey, we're down 8 and or maybe down 10 and whatever, third quarter or even second quarter, anytime, I think that a lot of times switching to zone can get you, a few stops that you need, get you back in the game, and then you can either go back into man or just stay in the zone. So that's for me another time that I like to switch. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about zone offense, and we're both 2-3 guys for the most part, although we probably will continue to test other things. But as far as attacking a 2-3 zone defense, what are some strategies that you want to use on offense?
Definitely, you've got to have someone playing the high post. I'm a huge proponent of that. I think if you can get the ball to the high post, um, that you're kind of collapsing the zone, because those two top guards have to, so at least one of them has to take it. Realistically, maybe both. The low post, whoever's playing the center position's got to kind of come out. So once you do that and you collapse those places and you can get the ball to the high post, you've got easy kickouts to one side or the other. Or if nobody picks you up, you've got a wide open mid range. Um, so I really like getting the ball up there. And I don't want to say you have to have someone at the high post. There are offenses where you don't have someone there, but I just think that's a really big weak point in the zone. Um, and then obviously getting the ball to the wings. I mean, a lot of times moving the ball around, and if you can get the ball to the wings and you got shooters ready, you can get open shots. Like realistically in a zone, you should get an open shot almost every time, because offensively you can move the ball quicker than most teams can rotate. Um, so that's another way. Overloading the zone, getting a certain amount of players on the same side, so that if it's a 2-3, they can only put so many players on one side in their defense. And then maybe you've got two players guarding three people. It's the same thing. Somebody's going to be open. So I think those are some of the things that I look for. Or when I think about attacking a zone, those are some of the main things.
Yeah, and I think everyone will agree with the getting that ball to the high post, right? I mean, that I feel like that's one thing that I totally harp on, and something that when I watch film, I'm like, why are you not passing it to the high post right
Hmm.
there? And I remember even in practice, like a couple times last year, I'm like, okay, timeout, check. I'm in. You're out. I'm in. I'm on the wing. And like every time I got it, it was just like bam, high post, bam. And you get frustrated with your players, like, why aren't you
Right.
guys getting it there? Like, but I understand that they don't want to turn it over and whatever. So actually, last year I took a real good look at getting the ball to the high post and realized there's actually a couple ways to do it that maybe you don't think about typically. So, for example, if I have the ball on top, we're going against a 2-3, and I throw it to the wing, you want to look to throw it to the high post right there, right? But if the defense does a good job and they rotate and they bump or whatever, and now the wing's guarded by the top guy, and then the other top guy in the zone is guarding the high post, if you can space that point guard out just a little bit, like so that he's not directly in front of that high post player, I found that on that swing back, there's going to be a moment where that point guard gets a catch. The guy that was guarding the high post is going to guard the point guard. And then that's a good opportunity right there to go
Mhm.
just high post right there.
Right.
So that worked good. We practiced that a lot. And so, yeah, the only thing or one of the things that I want to also include in this is short corner. We work on getting that ball to the short corner a lot against zones so that that high post guy can dive, right? Get it to that short corner. We teach our high post guys to dive and then smash and seal on whoever's down there, right? If you can dive and catch and get a layup, great. But a lot of times that middle guy is going to pick you up if you get a short corner catch and just smash on that guy, seal him, get a catch and go
Hmm.
up. We're going to talk a little bit more as we go on about other ways to attack it, but those are kind of just the main things for me: short corner, high post, and then, like you said, that ball movement's crucial. Another thing too that I'm going to mention, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I'll just drop the idea now is there's that point in time where when the ball goes to the wing, especially off a swing, where most zone defenses, the bottom guy is going to guard the wing, and then the top guy will bump him down. Is that how you guys do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Okay. So I think pretty much everybody does it then. But there's that point there where you have the bottom guy out, and there's opportunity, I think, there to kind of what I call pick on that bottom guy. We've got to pick on that guy all game. So
Hmm.
we're going to talk more about that when we get to that point. But yeah, so if you're listening right now, like Coach said, high post, short corner. Was there anything else?
I said just looking for the wing when they're open, overload.
Oh
Overloading
yeah,
the wing.
overload. Cool. Yeah, I love overloads too, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about ball screens. So speaking of that, so let's talk about some different ideas in attacking the 2-3 zone defense. So the first one let's talk about is ball screens. So using ball screens to attack a zone. Are you a fan of that or what?
Yeah. So, and we were kind of talking on this earlier. When I first, I don't know, 10 years ago when I was playing at Cuesta, I had a lot of international teammates and, from Europe, from different parts of the world. And in the US, my whole life pretty much, and even now, most teams I see when they run a zone offense, there's no screening involved, or there's minimal screening involved. Like people think, okay, you're in a zone, you can't run a pick and roll anymore, right? And I remember my teammates would be like, I don't get why you guys do that in America. Like you can still run a pick and roll against a zone. And they would kind of talk about it. And, at the time I was like, okay. And I listened. And now as I've gotten older, some of that stuff I use actually. And I agree, they're right. Like you still can use screens. You can still use, ball screen. And the way you can think about it is if you've got your 2-3, you got your 3 low, 2 high. If you screen the inside person or even the outside, I'm trying to word this the best way so people can follow along. If let's say you've got the ball on the left wing and you got a big that comes up and attacks that first guard that's guarding him, and there's a ball screen there, well, either they're going to get to the middle because nobody picks them up, and then you got to kick out, or if the other guard on the weak side steps up to guard them after they come off the screen, now whoever's on the other wing, you've got a kick and there's nobody there. You got a wide open jump shot. I mean, it's impossible to guard that unless, like I said, like you said, maybe that low man comes out, but you can also do an overload and you can put someone in the corner, and then there's nobody that can guard that. Like it's literally mathematically impossible unless you're going to have your center run all the way out to the corner to guard, a shooter out there. And I don't know any zones that run that. That's not really a zone anymore. That's like man defense almost. So Yeah, I just think there's a lot of ways. You can also screen the outside person on the zone. So, you got the ball at the top, you get a screen on let's say you're right in the middle, you got a screen on your right side. You come off that screen attacking towards the wing. Well, now if it's you and a shooter in the corner, the only person that can step up and guard you is that low forward, usually the bump
Mm-hmm.
man, and it's 2-on-1. So either he picks you up and you kick it to the corner for a wide open shot, or he doesn't pick you up and now you're going to the rim, or at least getting in the paint and you can kick weak side for an open shot. So I'm a huge fan of using screens. I don't know if you can use it as like every single time down. You can, but I like it more to like mix it in. Sometimes we just do more type of passing stuff, and then we'll switch in some screening stuff to kind of keep the defense on their toes.
Yeah, I agree. I love ball screens against zone offense. I love all the things you just said right there with the overload and stuff. And I like to use the ball screen as an entry sometimes, like to get into our zone offense. So if you can just imagine two guys on the blocks, two guys on the wings with a point guard, throw that ball to the wing, and then that point guard would cut through to the corner, the opposite corner. So that big will come up and set that ball screen, just like you were saying on the wing. And if you have that other post player too on the opposite block, now you have like a super overload, right? So what we teach is come off, try to draw that other defender, kick it to the wing, and that should be a 3-on-2. If you have somebody in the corner, like you were saying, and then someone on the block as well, that should always be a 3-on-2. And then we just use that sometimes as like an entry, right? So now we're into our just basic zone offense, but hopefully, that will cause the defense to have to rotate or shift, like you said, send the middle guy out to the corner. So
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Um, and honestly, I think you can run a lot of ball screen offenses, man ones, against zone. Like the European continuity offense. Like I think you could run that against the zone and even get like that roller on the ball reversal, that first ball screen guy to roll. And I think you can get that high-low probably.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried that in the games?
We don't run it like that. I've never ran that type of offense against a zone, but we kind of like I said, we took it and made it into a zone offense by screening the inside, of the top of the zone, or screening the outside of the top of the zone and creating those advantages. So I've never run it with like continuity, but it could work. I think the main thing is you got to have people that can make passes through the zone, and that's the most dangerous part, I think, is let's be honest, like most players are not great passers. They're not super accurate passers. So if you've got, someone that's kind of like a sloppy passer, or they're just a little bit afraid to make that pass, it's probably going to end in a turnover with that, and there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing worse than turning the ball over in a zone, because you're like, nobody's guarding you. It's like the worst feeling. You're like, how are we turning the ball over? They're in a zone. But yeah, I do think definitely there's a possibility it could work. You just got to have the right people to make those passes, because they are kind of, they're small windows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely against the zone. I mean, there's the way people teach zone, right? Hands up, active hands,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get deflections and stuff. Yeah, and so in looking at running more ball screens against the zone last year, we had really quick athletic point guards last year. So I was like, okay, let's get them to use some ball screens from the top. So we actually ran a play that was kind of interesting, and I can't remember where I ran across this, but we put it in, and it was a good like late in the clock against the zone, because right, like against man, late in the clock you can just go into a ball screen and create, but against zone you're just like swinging the ball, and then you're like 10, 9. So we would just run this play, we'd just get it up top, and we would have two players on the blocks, and they would cross. Okay, they would run up to set a ball screen for him, and they would cross, and it was almost like a reverse horns action, right? So in horns, right, they're setting the screens on the outside, and they would
Mm-hmm.
set the screens on the inside. They would cross and screen those two top guys on the inside, and he would just drive straight into the paint down the gut.
Yeah. Okay.
And it wasn't like something that was like a huge part of what we did, but it was something that every now and then, late in the clock, or like after a timeout, there was like only 10 seconds left, and we knew they were going to run zone, we would run stuff like that. But
It catches them off guard, kind of.
yeah. And one thing that you mentioned that I thought was cool is screening the outside of the zone, right? Because normally when you are running zone defense, like someone's got to stop the ball, right? On the top of that 2-3, someone's going to kind of be designated to come up. So screen that outside of that guy, I could see definitely creating a lot of advantages off that. One thing with our ball screens against the zone that we weren't really able to do, and maybe it was because of what we just talked about, was hitting the roller. Have you ever ran any kind of ball screen against zone and stuff and been able to get it to the roller?
Minimally, I would say, like, not something that sticks out of my mind where I would say like, yeah, it happened all the time. I mean, I'm sure it happened, but I don't think it's a huge thing because, like you said, usually there's just a post or a couple posts, sitting down there just kind of waiting
Yeah.
for you. So it's a little tough. But like you said, what you talked about, where if you got a big, 6'8", 6'9", and you can smash down, maybe get a seal 5 feet from the basket, you could maybe get something like that. But you have to have the type of post player that can make that seal and hold their ground, catch, and then you got to be able to go up quick and score.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Okay. So that's a little bit of ball screen talk. Let's just talk about screening in general against the zone. And one last thing about ball screens before we get into that is another kind of cool concept that we weren't able to do it, but like imagine if your high post guy has the green light to set a ball screen at any time. We tried that. I think it just takes more time to really kind of get that, but when the ball comes back up to the top to the point, I think that's a good opportunity to screen because you got guys that are out of position. Some, the top guy was on the wing, and now the other top guy's guarding you. Now he's getting hit with the ball screen. Now you've created another advantage. So anyways, I just wanted to add that, and if you have any other ball screen ideas and you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to leave them in the comments because I'm always trying to learn about that. But anyways, let's talk a little bit about screening against the zone now, like not ball screens, like off ball screens or whatever. Do you guys use any of that, or have you seen any of that kind of stuff successfully?
Yeah, I don't use a ton of it, and it depends. Like, I definitely use it more against, I feel like 3-2 zones. And I know today our topic is 2-3, so I'm not going to go too far into that. But 3-2s, I use it more because you have two low, and I feel like you can pin the low players
Yeah.
where they're at and find a corner shot. 2-3, I've seen same type of action happen where you like pin one of the top guards. I mean, I guess it's kind of similar to like an on-ball screen where if you screen the outside of the zone and instead of the guard coming off, they just kick out to the wing, you can get a shot out there. But I don't use as much off-ball screening in zones, but it is something that can be done. I don't want to sit here and make it sound like you can't do it. I've also seen where I think one of the most common ones is balls on one wing and that high post guy sneaks in behind the weak side guard defender, right? You got two guard defenders, sneaks in behind and sets a flare. And then that skip pass is right over the top, and the other side there's a guard just ready to shoot. So little stuff like that.
Yeah, I love that play actually, that you just mentioned with the ball on the wing and then screening the top guy and the bottom guy. I feel like a lot of these zone actions too are, you think, okay, you can get a three off that, but a lot of times you get somebody, fighting through that screen and chasing out to guard that three, and then you get the dump in inside, or you get the high post catch off that. So I think that using screens in that way too is pretty cool, just to make sure you teach your players that after you screen to always open to the ball. I think you can get good short corner catches, high post catches with that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like one thing that we talk about a lot, and like I mentioned earlier, is picking on that guy. Like, so that one guy that has to, the bottom of the 2-3 on the wing, the outside of the 2-3 on the bottom, has to, like we talked about, come out and guard those wings, right? Bump down, come out, bump down. So I like to try to pick on that guy with our bottom guys and have them screen that guy. So that's almost like it's not a play call. It's just like, hey, anytime you can, screen this outside guy, so that you our wing guy can get a catch. Just kind of the same concept we just talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as far as other kind of off ball screens, I think it is just, there's no like pass screen away or anything like that against
Yeah.
zone. But in racking my brain, I know there's a ton of sets and that we like to run that are all involved in screening that bottom guy basically. And so in talking about setting screens, what are some other things that we can do against zones besides ball screens, off ball screens? What would be another kind of maybe movement
Offense
or
or
action?
movement.
I
I
mean, obviously,
ran.
go ahead.
Okay, no, go ahead. Go ahead. What were you
I was gonna
saying?
say, obviously, like flashing, right? Like, so there's got to be some player movement where we're flashing. So, do you like to keep somebody at the high post? Have you seen people flash them there? Is it guards? Is it bigs? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I generally like to keep someone at the high post, but I've also seen and I've also done or worked with offenses where that low post and high post can interchange. So as ball gets swung, high post dives down, low post dives or flashes high, because then it keeps the defense from just sticking on one person the whole time. But you kind of have to, again, it depends on your personnel, because if your low post, let's say normally your five's playing low, your four's playing high, right? So if your five can't hit that 15-foot mid range and they catch there, it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's worthless, but there's just not a lot of value you're going to get out of it. So
Hmm.
if I have a four that I'm like, she can hit that shot consistently, and my five I know can score around the basket, I'm probably going to want to keep my four at the high post as much as possible. But if you've got interchangeable fours and fives, I mean, you're living the luxury, right? Then you can do whatever you want. And I think it's harder to guard when you do have that interchange and that flash.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think I remember maybe 2 or 3 years ago coaching the freshmen. We would have a lot of time. We would run the interchanging with the both bigs working back and forth, flashing to the high post, diving. But a lot of times, just what you said, that would happen to us. We would get our big to catch the high post, and it just it wasn't the best look for us.
Right.
And
But
another problem, kind of too, with that flashing with the bigs is like you don't have somebody in the short corner or in the low post on a quick ball reversal because that guy's got to dive. So, I mean, that's kind of another thing that I've seen that's like, I wish we could just swing it and dump it in there,
mm-hmm.
because that's the moment when that guy's out, that bottom guy's out. But
It's
okay.
all timing. I think it's all
Yeah.
timing. Where you're saying that, and that's what I was going to say a second. I was like, it all depends on, um, are you still going to be able to get your timing right? Because that's one of the main things with obviously with any offense. But as especially in a zone, if you can get your players to the right spots at the right time, you should really get an open shot almost at any time.
Yeah. No, totally agree. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the defensive side now. So you are like, hey, we're going to run zone this game because we're playing big or because this team can't shoot or whatever the case might be. Or maybe you just switch to it, at halftime. When do you get out of it? When do you say, maybe I was wrong on that? Or, what would be your trigger, I guess?
So, I mean, the first and most obvious is going to be when the other team just starts draining threes on you, right? Like it's super easy. I actually kind of a funny story. When I was coaching at Cuesta, we played, I think it was Fullerton College, and Fullerton College was really good. And they had this point guard who was like a D1 kickback, right? But he couldn't shoot. He was shooting like 15% from three on the season. So we're like, all right, we're going to sit in the zone. We're going to make them shoot. And as a team, they were like one of the bottom teams in the state 3-point shooting. They came out and hit like some absurd number of threes in the first half, right? Like 10, 12 threes, right? We end up we're down by like 30 at halftime. And we're just sitting there as a coaching staff. We're like, just stay in it. Just stay. They can't keep making it. They can't keep making it. And Coach Blair just looks at us. He's like, one more, one more, one more. Like every time they make a three, he's like, just stay in it for one more. Just stay in for one more. Like as assistants, we were trying to tell him to stay in it. And at halftime, he's like, dude, we can't stay in this anymore. We're down by 30. Like, what are we doing?
Mm,
And it was a team where it was one of those things where scouting report, they were bottom 5 in the state in 3-point shooting, but they got hot. So you can't sit there and let your pride. And realistically, we probably stayed in it too long. We probably should have gotten out before halftime. But those type of situations where teams just bombing threes and they're hitting and they're feeling good, and sometimes that's infectious. And other people on the team that normally don't hit shots, they see it going from a teammate, and now they're shooting well. You got to just swallow your pride and say, all right, tip your cap. We got to go do something different. So that's definitely one where it's like you got to get out of it. And then I think another thing that people don't think about when they talk about zones is rebounding. It's way harder to rebound out of a zone because you don't know who you're matched up against. It could change depending on where the ball's at and where the other team is at. It's not like in man where it's like, oh, that's my man and I need to box them out. So if you're struggling rebounding really bad and the other team's just getting a ton of offensive rebounds, you might want to pull out of the zone because whether they're missing shots or not, if they keep getting second and third chance points, it's probably not helping you out. So those are a couple of things I thought of off the top of my head.
yeah, totally agree. I think the offensive rebounding thing is huge. So what we tell our guys is obviously you want to try to box somebody out if they're in your area, but that's not always easy in the zone. So we just have like our top guys flood the weak side, right? Because that's normally the culprits, right? It's like you have your two top guards on the top, and like they're the ones that aren't doing any rebounding in the zone. The bottom guys are kind of in it. So we just have those guys flood the weak side on the jumper or whatever the shot is, and hopefully it bounces long. We can grab rebounds there.
Mm-hmm.
Another weakness of the zone that we haven't talked about is transition defense, just getting matched up, right? Guys are running back to their spots, like they're
Right.
literally running underneath the rim when there's a guy with the ball right next to them.
Yeah.
And so that's one way to beat the zone is you beat it down the floor and play in transition. So I think that's another thing that I would get out of it for. But yeah, same thing for me, hitting threes on us, or getting that ball. Even more painful for me than hitting the threes is when they get the high low, like every time. You're just like, like, because you teach your players how to guard it, but some teams are really good at that little high low from the high post down, or the short corner to the diver.
Hmm.
Yeah, those ones, if teams are really good at that, we'll get out of it. But yeah, it's definitely tough because you go into it and you're like, okay, we're going to run some zone right now to come back into this game. And then they hit a three on the first possession. Because as soon as the other team's like, oh, they're in zone, all the shooters are like, okay, like they're
Yeah.
ready to let one fly.
Oh, we're excited. We're
Yeah.
so excited.
They're like, if I get an open look, it's going up. And so it's, giving somebody the green light like that, and then they hit the three, and it's like the first possession, and then you're just like, I want to get out of it already, but it's
Hmm.
too late. Yeah, so those are always just really tough in-game decisions that you've made and I've made before.
And I think you touched on one of the things when you said guarding an area like defensively. And I don't know if this is something we're going to talk about anyways, but in a zone, you still have man principles. Like you still have to guard a person. I always heard like don't guard the ghost. Like if there's nobody there, you can't just sit there and do nothing. You got to be in some type of position, even if it's just help side or near your man, to the closest guy. Like you can't just run back. And when people think of 2-3, you can't look at it as like literally like two people up top and three below, and it's just this perfect little shape. Like that's not how a 2-3 is. A 2-3 is going to morph and change and move. Um, and yeah, you have your areas that you're guarding, but there needs to be a person in that area. So if there's nobody in that area, then you need to get somewhere to be in help side or to drop and to be able to help out.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking on that, as far as principles in guarding, how do you have or what would you recommend your top two guards do? Do you have one guy stop the ball? Because I've seen a lot of times, you'll have it's almost like a 1-1-3, right? Because one
Hmm.
guy's stopping the ball up top, one guy's maybe has first pass. So just talk a little bit about how you want your top guys to stop the ball.
So I've done a 1-1-3 a lot. That kind of morphs into that 2-3. I've also had times where the team just sits, or we get into 2-3 and it works out as well. I try to have top person. One of them needs to communicate to stop the ball, and then the person behind them has first pass. Obviously, if that top guard dribbles over whoever has on the ball, just stays with them, and the other person just falls to the other side. But with that being said, if you think about it, let's say the offense is running a 3 in or 3 out, 2 in. If you've got one person on the ball and one person behind them waiting for first pass, you're going to technically have two people open, right? On the wings. You have one
Yeah.
person on each wing. So if that person behind them takes away first pass or like shades more to that side, right, to take away that first pass, the other wing is going to be wide open. So what you have to do is you have to have your low man on, I guess you would say that's the weak side, although technically it's the middle of the court at this point. But on whatever side that guard's not guarding, they have to come up and shade up to be able to guard that. So if that pass goes to that wing, now you've got your forward there to come up, and then they can get bumped off by that initial top guard again. So that's kind of how I would say is the best way to start out in your zone.
Yeah, I've definitely tried that in the past too. I think against teams that have not a great ball handler as a point or something, that's super effective because you can literally have that top guy like pick them up as early as you really want, right? To a certain degree, but imagine being able to play zone defense and being able to pressure the point guard, almost at half court and still be fine on the weak side because you guys got guys rotating and bumping over and stuff. I
Right.
personally don't do that. I'm more stuck with a two guys and three on the bottom. Top guys hands up. One guy will take him, but he won't fully. I don't have him fully commit to him. We just kind of one guy will shade. I guess you could say the ball, his responsibility. The other guy is more sticking on the high post right there. And if you imagine, a 2-3, so you have two guys on top. If one guy is taking the ball or shading the ball, then whatever his side is, just kind of like you were talking about, is more open, right? So now the bottom guy's everyone's kind of shift, right? It's just like a blob. I always talk about a blob.
Mm-hmm.
And so the bottom guy now is his responsibility is the wing, his responsibility is the high post, his responsibility is the low. And so I think it's kind of the same principle. It's the exact same principle you just talked about, but it's just, I think players don't recognize that, hey, depending on who's stopping the ball changes a lot of your responsibility, as far as, those bottom guys go. So,
Hmm.
um, okay. So let's talk a little bit about high post. So let's say we're on defense, the ball's on the wing. Who do you have guard the high post if they have somebody at the high post?
I have normally my other top guard. So one guard's taking the ball in the wing, other top guards covering the high post. But I don't teach a full like front or a full deny. And the reason being is because we talked about earlier, that flare screen. If you fully front, they're just going to sit there and set a screen, and the other guard can just kind of rise up a little bit on the weak side. You got a direct pass, catch, wide open shot every time, and there's no way you can guard that. So what I teach is kind of like I don't know. I don't want to say like a 3/4, but it's basically 1 foot over. So you're facing towards the ball, right? Like say the ball's out that way. My chest is towards the ball, and I've got an arm out to try and deter that pass to the high post. But I'm not fully denying them. I'm not like body for body even with them. I just kind of maybe have like 1 foot over atop their foot, and my other foot is open. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That way, if they try and pin and screen, you just can roll off it and you can close back out to the other side. And it's a very like small, minute detail because you can be just like a couple feet out of place over to the right, and then all of a sudden you can get pinned. Um, and it's kind of like we talked about. It's hard for players to make that high post pass. So
Mm-hmm.
if you can get a guard up there with just a hand in there, and then you've got your post players kind of staying low, and they're not necessarily fully guarding it, but they're kind of there too to maybe deter it. Most players aren't going to throw that ball super accurately from the wing to the high post. So I think that's, for me, it's been pretty effective. Usually I have when I have troubles guarding the high post, it's because we forget to do that, and we're
Mm-hmm.
late. We don't get there in time. But that's how I like to work it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of 2-3-101, right? I think everyone has the top guys guard the high post, because what happens a lot of times, if the middle bottom guy guards the high post, then you're going to get beat with that high low a lot, right? If
Hmm.
that ball gets to the high post and there's no one down low, you're going to get beat with that high low. Okay, so here's one thing that I've always kind of gone back and forth on, and like, so what happens when the ball does go to the high post? So the high post just
Yeah.
gets a catch. He turns. Who would you delegate responsibility to there?
I mean, it's hard if you've got a guard that's if the guard, I guess, is in position. Although I really can't think of many opportunities that they catch high posts and the guard's in position, and I guess the guard would pick them up. Realistically, it's gonna be up on that center post player, because they're the next person in line, and you got to stop the ball. So if they catch it and they start attacking the basket, that post has got to step up. But the fact of the matter is, I think a lot of times once you get high post and you're able to get a little dribble drive into the paint, it's just going to open things up. So you may stop the initial drive and you may stop that layup from happening, but anyone who's a decent passer is going to see that zone is just going to collapse and you've got kickouts. And there's really not a whole lot you can do at that point except hope for that they miss the shot. Get out, close out, hope they miss. I think that the high post is really the main weak point of a zone. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. When the ball goes to the high post, I have our big guy try to step up. Our outside guy on the bottom of the zone will crash in, right, to
Mhm.
prevent the high lows.
Right.
And so what does that leave open? Well, it leaves open that weak side three. And like in our zone offense, right, we teach our high post guys to catch, face up for a shot, look for the dump in down low, and then look for the opposite, pass it opposite to the wing for the jumper. Also, we teach on high post catches, both wing guys need to get to the corner, because to get into the vision of our high post so he can catch, turn, he's got options. He's got corner, high low, corner. And so, yeah, we do have our middle guy step up on that, our outside guy dive in, and then the top side guard has got to get out on that weak side shooter, which is
Mhm.
hard to do because you're like trying to guard the high post. He gets a catch, big man steps up. It's almost like a bump, and then he would bump me over and I would sprint out to that wing. But yeah, like you said, you're almost beat at that point. If they're smart, they're going to get something, right? They have an advantage at least.
Right.
Um, Okay, so let's talk a little bit about zone defense and trapping at a zone. Are you a fan of that? If not, why? If you are, why? And yeah.
Out of a 2-3, I'm not a huge fan of trapping out of that. Now, there are certain zones which I think are great for trapping. 1-3-1s, 1-2-2s, which is kind of like, I guess similar to a 3-2, but a little bit different. Those type of zones I do like trapping more out of. But 2-3 is not an ideal one for me personally. And now have had teams run it. Like last year, there were quite a few teams that actually ran it against us, and they would try and like surprise you and jump you. And they would send like the two top players to run at the guard up top and try and catch them off guard
Mm-hmm.
and trap. But to be honest, like it's not a good trap. Like if you're prepared for it, it's so easy to break it. And there were teams where, I can understand a team running it like once or, a couple times a game. They make a call. Here comes a trap. Your point guard's not ready to pick up the ball. You're dead,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then there were teams that we would play where they would just run that as their thing for like 5 minutes straight. And every time it was like, all right, here it comes. And so since we were prepared for it, I just put someone at the high post, and to flash a little bit higher than normal. Those two guards would come running out at my point guard, just throw it right to the high post, and now you've got a 4-on-3 every time. And there's nothing that they can do at that point. So I don't like that. I think it's kind of like I said, if you use it every once in a while, you can catch someone off guard. But do I think it's a great trapping technique? No, I think it's pretty poor. And I think especially at like the higher level you get, teams are just going to throw it over the top of you to the open guy or girl, and you're done, and that's it. So not a huge fan of that. I've seen some on the wings too, where you throw it to the wing and the forward and the guard come out and trap. All those are just basically, if you can catch them off guard, it can be effective. But a good team that knows how to pass out of that and is not falling asleep, I think they're going to break those types of traps fairly easy.
Okay. Yeah, the trap up top, that seems like a tough one to pull off. We've practiced that a little bit before, and I've looked into that. But I've seen a lot of youth programs like when we go play like in the summers and stuff, they'll do that. I think one team is 3-ball. I think they run two guys at you almost every time. And boy, at the youth level, it is effective. I'm not going to lie.
Mm-hmm.
At the high school level, I don't know if maybe not. Like you said, people are better passers and stuff. But I do like trapping the wings and especially the short corners. Short corners that's a great place to trap because it's just natural. And same with the wings. To me, it's natural too. Like anytime you have two defensive players, that are on the ball, like during that bump situation, like that could naturally just go into a trap. And I think as long as everyone's on the same page and, we have a call for it. So, we are on the same page. Everyone's going to be able to rotate out of it and take away, the nearest pass. And you can actually do it in a way where you're not really in danger because it is zoned. So like, for example, point guard throws it to the wing, top guy goes and traps with the bottom guy. Middle guy can just bump over to that low post. That's just right there. And then the other top guy can take away the high post. So you got a trap on the wing, high post is taken away, low post is taken away. And then you have that last guy, that weak side, low post guy that can go and take that skip pass away.
Mm-hmm.
So if he comes up and goes for that skip pass, which is a really hard pass in general, the only pass that you're really giving up is that pass right back to the point guard.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you run this every single time, then they're just going to get it back to their point guard and he's going to be able to go.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are able to, disguise it and run it out of a timeout or just on certain calls or whatever, you can, like I said, you can do it safely because that pass back to the point guard 9 times out of 10 is not going to hurt you. You got a guard right there. You got a big right there. So that's one way I like to trap. And then also, like I said, short corner, it's kind of the same thing. This one, imagine the ball goes into the short corner. You would have your bottom guy trapping with your wing guy. But here's where it gets a little bit dangerous because now you are going to have your other top guy has got to sprint all the way across and take that pass back out to the wing. So imagine the ball's in the short corner. That guy's coming across, take that wing pass, and now you got your high post. So then you're going to have your big guy step up or somebody step up, take that high post. Otherwise, that dive is going to be a layup right there. But yeah, so that's kind of just a few ideas on trapping out of the zone. And even like with the trap up top that you said, you guys saw a few times, like it's high risk, but I think for teams that all they do is run zone, like that's when you're going to start seeing those kind of traps, right? Like if we run man, like why would we ever, why would we ever need to run two guys at the ball like that? Just randomly we can just pressure the ball. But if you're going to sit back in zone and the clock's ticking, it's fourth quarter, you're down 10, all you do is run zone. Like, yeah, you're going to see that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with who you're playing and what their personnel is. Because you're right. I mean, you make a good point that the skip pass is hard for players to be prepared for. I guess my thoughts on that are like good teams, like really really good teams. Most of the time are going to be pretty prepared for that stuff, and so they'll probably break it easier. But maybe not so good or average teams, you could probably run it a lot more effectively because they don't have the personnel. They don't have players that can make those skip passes accurately. But I guess what I worry about when you talk about that weak side situation is if you've got a player that's smart and on offense and they flash to the middle where I know you're playing help side, but if someone cuts to the middle and they flash and you throw that pass in there, like again, it's a catch and it's like a 2-on-1, 10 feet from the basket. But on the flip side, how many players recognize that every single time when the ball gets to the wing? Probably not a whole lot. So there is effectiveness to it. I do agree with you that wing trap is probably a lot more safe and protected than the top trap. I didn't see a whole lot of that. I really, most of the time I'm thinking about it, saw the top trap. But yeah, I think you're right. Like if you're sitting in a zone, it does give you something else that you can throw at a team. And if you can do it safely, then there's nothing wrong with it. But you can't do it for like 10 minutes straight.
Yeah, and no matter what, if you're trapping, then you're at a disadvantage in some way, right?
Yeah.
They got a numbers game on you in some way. If they're able to get it out and not only get it out, I feel like getting it out of the trap that's okay, but that's not going to like get you a bucket. But if you can get it out of the trap and then maybe like one more pass, that's when I think the defense is in danger.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess that's maybe something you have to talk with your players about. And I know one of my mentor coaches used to always talk about hot potato. Like if teams are trapping, then your players better know how to play hot potato because that's what you essentially have to do, right? You don't want to hold it and get trapped. You just want to get it out because that's like as effective as breaking the trap as probably even more effective to break a trap before it gets to you and get it out of your hands than it is to wait for it to come and trap and then to get it out because they're running full speed at you to trap you, and if you get it out quick, they got to stop, slow down, turn around. No one's ready. The rotations aren't ready, but okay. Yeah. So that's a little bit about zone defense and zone offense. Is there anything else, Coach, that you'd like to add? Maybe.
I think one last thing, just talking about just general zone offenses. One thing that I've seen, and that's something that I've had teams that have struggled with this, is kind of what you just talked about, the hot potato, but not when we're playing a trapping team, just a team that's playing regular 2-3 zone.
Yeah.
And instead of attacking it, I think people forget you still have to attack the zone. Like you have to be able to get into the gaps. You can't just pass all the time. I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong, getting it high-low is great, but you've got to be able to get some type of penetration into the zone. And when you just play a hot potato back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then the shot clock's winding down, and now you got to jack up a shot, it's really not great for your offense. And we struggled with that early last year because my players were thinking so rigidly. It's like, well, this is where I'm supposed to be, and this is where I'm supposed to do with the ball, instead of like, oh, I just caught the ball in the wing and there's nobody guarding me. Let me get into the paint, So I think just think about it. Don't forget, like, you still got to be able to drive. You still got to be able to penetrate. Otherwise, they're just gonna milk the clock down every possession, and they're gonna jack up a shot, and you're just hoping you beat them off of making threes. So,
yeah, I think that's probably the most valuable takeaway from this whole episode is that gaps. That's really what it's about, right? Getting the ball into gaps and making flashes into gaps and getting catches in the gaps and attacking gaps. And I think if you can do that, right, then you're drawing help, and then from there it's just keep the advantage, get the shot. Kind of one other thing that I wanted to just touch on before we wrap this up is just one other little strategy that we talk a lot about with our post players, and that's just sealing and pinning, right? You should constantly be pinning. If you're at the high post and someone's guarding you, well, at least pin them, right? Like kind of like how you said, like you have your top guy guard him in a certain way. Well, okay, pin him and hold him off on the other side. If he was guarding him on the other side, pin him and hold him off there. And same with the bottom guys, the bottom big in your zone, like he should either be pinning that guy in on the bottom of the zone, or he should be pinning him on the outside so that when it does go to the high post or whenever the ball gets swung, you might get a catch right there and go up. And I know a team in our league, Templeton, they run like a 3-out, 2-in zone offense, and they swing the ball, and the guards are the only ones that are flashing to the high post, and the bigs are literally just staying on the block and doing what I just said. They're either pinning you on the inside or pinning you on the outside. And so when they do get a catch at the high post, they just look down low, and one of those two guys is probably pinning their guy on the outside and just gets a catch, layup. So I think pinning, gaps, like you said, are kind of major takeaways from today's episodes. So all right, that's all we got for this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like today's episode and you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on iTunes, then make sure to subscribe there as well. We come out with a new episode once a week, and we hope to see you guys in the next episode.
Peace.